I think the first thing when you and we have those wounds, one of the first things we do is we think, does God see what's going on here? I mean, does he see my loneliness? Does he see my marriage that is like empty and listless? And I'm wondering if it will always be this way. Does he see this child that I've prayed for and prayed for and prayed for, and they are still so lost? Does he see my wife withering from cancer and dying when I have little children? Does God see me? Or does he just see this, a crowd? I think we think that when we're in pain and we feel this inside. And I want you to know that I think somehow in her heart, Naomi realized that God sees you. And he sees us individually. And this is how I know. In this whole big story of the judges, he's telling about this judge and this battle and all this time of Israel. And then the Holy Scriptures shrink it down. And they tell a story about one family who really, really suffered. And then they opened their hands back up to God. And he met them. And he restored her. And sometimes when I get really confused about who God is, I remember that verse from Colossians 1:15 that says, if you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. It says Jesus is the image of the invisible God. And so when I get confused about theology or wondering where God is or just flat out in pain, I sometimes will just look at Jesus and read his stories in the scriptures. And I see that again and again and again, when Jesus would be teaching, that crowds would come, right? Because he was so different. The other teachers, they talk about God, and it was boring. And it was snooze-a-rama, and Jesus talked about God like he knew him. Like it was real. And people needed that, and they were hungry for that, and crowds pressed up on him all the time. But then it'll say, crowds were surrounding Jesus, and suddenly a woman who had been bleeding, sick, for 12 years, touched his cloak. And he stopped, and he looked down at her and touched her and said, woman, because of your faith, you will be healed. And then, right then, a synagogue leader, right in front of all these people, leader of the church, comes up and he falls on his face and he begs Jesus. He says, my daughter just died. But if you come, she'll live. And Jesus says, because of your faith, she will live. And you remember the story of them walking down the streets, and it's like a parade, and it's like mass people. It's so crowded that one man literally climbed a tree so he could just get a look at this guy. Who is this guy? And Jesus, in all these people, what does he do? He goes, Zacchaeus, dude, your heart is so wrapped around money. You have so got money as your God, and you are dying inside. And I see that from over here, so I'm having dinner with you, and we're going to talk about it. And I want you to know that God loves you. And even though you think you're dark and unsavable, and all the things you've done and all the people that you've cheated make you someone that God would never love, he does. And Zacchaeus was new. Again and again and again, Jesus' image of God it is not a crowd that God sees. It is individual lives and individual fears and wounds and hopes and dreams. And he is saying, if you put your faith in me, I will meet you where you are.